The hillside was a sea of dead goats. Cal Fire officials moved through the carnage. Scott Edwards stood at the center, clutching a folder that contained the truth.
They were just goats. They can't be Cal Fire. This has to be a mistake or I am going to prison.
This herd was contracted by Cal Fire. They were the only firebreak this community had.
The contract read, Goat Grazing Unit, designated for wildfire fuel load reduction in high-risk Zone 7.
She killed them, and now there's nothing to stop the fire from burning everything she owns and everyone else's.
The fire that would consume 47 homes, including hers, was already inevitable the moment the last goat collapsed. She silenced their bleating, and unknowingly lit the fuse on a disaster that would consume her entire world. 6 months earlier, Scott Edwards' herd was the best defense the fire-prone hillside had ever known. Their constant bleating was the sound of safety for the homes below, a sound Cynthia Hartman despised. She decided the noise had to stop, and in doing so, she sealed the fate of everyone she knew. 6 months before the hillside became a firestorm, Scott Edwards sat across from Cal Fire Chief Tom Mitchell and put pen to paper.
Your goats will eat the brush that could burn this whole valley. This contract protects thousands of homes.
Each goat wore a Cal Fire identification tag. They were now the smallest firefighters in the state. From her SUV, Cynthia Hartman watched them with growing resentment. The bleating cut through the silence of her gated community.
The HOA handbook has noise limits. Those animals are a violation, and I am going to enforce it.
A formal complaint landed on the HOA's desk, citing noise disturbances and demanding removal of the goat herd.
Chief, the HOA chair wants my goats gone. Calls the bleating a nuisance. Your contract supersedes any HOA rule. I'll send a letter confirming Cal Fire authorized this grazing unit.
Cal Fire? They think they can override the board. I'll find another way.
Cynthia refused to accept that 400 goats stood between her and silence. But her next move would cost far more than sleep. The HOA meeting became a courtroom for a flock of goats. Nobody had asked to arrive.
These animals are a public nuisance. I've had complaints from 20 residents about the constant bleating.
Cynthia's right. If we don't enforce the noise ordinance, what's next? A pig farm next door.
Scott Edwards received the official violation letter, but he didn't flinch. His contract was ironclad.
They have no jurisdiction over Cal Fire land. This letter is just noise.
Mr. Edwards, if you don't remove those goats, I'll have animal control out here so fast your head will spin.
You can call whoever you want. These goats are saving your home from a fire you don't believe is coming.
You arrogant little. You think you are above the HOA? We'll see about that. Legal routes are too slow. There has to be a faster way to make them disappear.
Cynthia decided the goats wouldn't survive another week. She knew exactly where to turn for help. Cynthia Hartman didn't need a gun to kill. She needed a 4-gallon jug of antifreeze and a trusted friend who never said no.
Margaret, you said you'd do anything to keep this community quiet. I need you to prove it.
This is insane. But Cynthia's right. Legal ways failed. One night, and it's over.
That night, 2 shadows moved through the dry grass with a jug that weighed 20 pounds.
Don't think about it. Just pour. Cynthia said it would be quick.
Hurry. Anyone could drive past. Pour every last drop. I am not going to jail for a herd of goats.
Margaret tipped the jug. Antifreeze cascaded into the water trough, invisible and sweet. The goats would drink before dawn. Cynthia stood 10 feet back, arms crossed, a tight smile on her lips. She'd finally silenced the bleating.
What have I done? No. Cynthia said it's necessary. For the community.
They walked away, leaving the empty jug beside the quiet pasture. Within hours, the hillside would become a graveyard. At dawn, Scott Edwards drove up the familiar rutted track and braked hard. The pasture was silent, but it was the wrong kind of silence.
They're not moving. None of them are moving. What happened?
He stumbled through the bodies, grabbing his phone. The call to Cal Fire was a raw, broken sentence.
Scott, we're here. State vets on site. Show us exactly where they drank.
Dr. Lisa Patel knelt beside a young goat, its tag still bright against the matted fur. She didn't need a lab to know it was poison.
230. I counted. They were my responsibility, and someone murdered them. Antifreeze. Ethylene glycol. Sweet taste. Lethal dose. Whoever did this knew what they were doing.
Water samples were bagged and labeled. The evidence told a story of deliberate, premeditated cruelty. Scott sat on the tailgate of his truck, head in hands. The herd that protected the valley was gone, and the investigation had only one question. Who hated these goats enough to kill them all? The lab report landed on Chief Mitchell's desk within 48 hours. Antifreeze. Ethylene glycol, 4 times the lethal concentration.
Scott, we've confirmed it's poison. Is there anyone who'd want your herd dead? Cynthia Hartman, HOA chair. She threatened to solve the problem a week before they died.
Dr. Patel confirmed the same chemical signature across every water trough. This was no accident.
They're outside. Cal Fire and a deputy. Act natural. They have nothing but a grudge. I had nothing to do with those goats. I wanted them gone. Yes, legally, nothing more.
You made threats, Mrs. Hartman. We have witnesses. If you know anything, now's the time.
Witnesses. Who? Margaret better keep her mouth shut.
Cynthia wasn't arrested that day. The evidence was strong, but not yet ironclad. The local news had other ideas. The community began to whisper. And in that whisper, Cynthia's name was never far from the flames. For 2 weeks, the hillside grew unchecked. The goats that had kept the brush down were gone, and the earth began to remember what it was before them.
I can't even sell the land. Without the herd, my contract is worthless. They took everything.
Every dry stalk was a fuse waiting for a spark, and the Santa Ana winds were already whispering promises of fire. The National Weather Service issued a red flag warning. Gusts up to 60 miles an hour. Humidity dropping into single digits. Scott stood at the fence line, staring at the sea of brown that had once been a green pasture, teeming with life.
They don't understand. Without the goats, this place is a bomb, and someone already lit the fuse.
Cynthia Hartman, still free, saw the overgrowth as victory. No noisy goats, no problem. She was catastrophically wrong. The fire marshal's report had noted the goats' scheduled grazing would have cleared 12 tons of dry fuel. That report sat in a file while the temperature climbed. On the 14th day, the humidity fell to 3%. The brush crackled underfoot like cellophane. It was no longer a question of if, but when, and somewhere in that silent, overgrown pasture, a single ember was about to rewrite the history of 47 homes. A spark from a power line sagging into dry brush ignited what the goats would have eaten weeks ago. Within minutes, a wall of flame raced toward Oakwood Estates on 60-mile winds. From above, it was a fast-moving tide. No firebreak remained. Firefighters tried to make a stand, but embers jumped a quarter mile and set roofs alight before hoses charged. Margaret Vaughn's house caught first. Flames hit the cedar shake roof, and the attic exploded in seconds.
Everything I own. Cynthia said it was just goats. Why is my house burning?
The first engine radioed. Structure fully involved. Winds gusting, can't stop spread. By midnight, the western slope was gone. The goats would have eaten the path they took. Evacuation orders came too late. The fire moved faster than any car. Margaret Vaughn stood across the street, watching her house become ash, flames reflected in her eyes. The fire her friend helped create consumed everything. Cynthia's house caught fire 30 minutes after Margaret's. The embers didn't ask whose roof they landed on.
This isn't real. I fixed the noise. Why is my own house burning?
Cars jammed the evacuation route. People abandoned them and ran, not knowing where safety was. 47 homes reduced to chimneys. Oakwood Estates became a black scar on the county map. The hillside the goats should have grazed was now a moonscape of ash and silence. The Oakwood Estates sign, once polished brass, lay twisted in the gutter, Its letters melted. Cynthia stood in the ruins of her home, but the smoke that choked her was the same smoke her choices had lit. The HOA sign, the symbol of her power, swung from a single charred post over a community that no longer existed. She had wanted silence. Now she had the loudest silence of her life, and in that silence, the countdown to her own destruction had only just begun. CAL FIRE investigators returned to the water trough, still carrying the poison that had started this chain reaction.
Chief, if my goats had been alive for their scheduled graze, they would have cleared that entire firebreak corridor.
The grazing schedule, mapped against the fire's path, showed a perfect overlap. The goats would have eaten the exact line where the fire first gained speed.
We can now confirm the deliberate poisoning of a CAL FIRE contracted goat herd directly contributed to the rapid spread of the Oakwood fire.
The press conference aired live. For the first time, the public heard the word arson linked to the case.
Arson? They're blaming me for the fire? That's insane. I only wanted quiet.
Dr. Patel's final report made it official. Ethylene glycol poisoning eliminated the only fuel management tool on that slope.
230 lives, and now 47 homes. It's not just animal cruelty anymore.
The district attorney's office announced they were reviewing potential criminal charges related to the fire's ignition. And as the investigation tightened, the woman who had started it all watched the news from a borrowed couch, her own home still smoldering. The national news anchor asked the question no one in Oakwood could answer. Who killed the goats that could have saved these homes?
My name is out there. People are connecting dots I thought I'd buried. I need to control this.
Every time I close my eyes, I see the goats. And the flames. It was supposed to be just noise.
Neighbors who had once nodded at Cynthia now crossed the street. The whispers grew louder than the bleeding ever was. Cynthia called Margaret 6 times. Each call went to voicemail. The silence on the other end was its own accusation.
I poured the jug. Cynthia didn't touch it. Why am I the one with nothing left?
The hashtag number, Your Goats Bleat, trended. Every share was another nail in the coffin of someone's reputation.
Margaret won't answer. If she breaks, I am finished. I need to get ahead of this.
She'll blame me. I know Cynthia. She'll make me the scapegoat. I have to act first.
The friendship that had poisoned a hillside was beginning to show its own fatal fracture. A security camera on a ranch gate had captured the entire crime. The footage was time-stamped, and it left no room for doubt. At 11:47 p.m., headlights cut across the pasture. Margaret Vaughn's SUV rolled to a stop. Lights off as a figure in a magenta vest stepped out.
The footage confirms Margaret Vaughn poured the antifreeze while Cynthia Hartman directed her. We have both of them.
A credit card receipt from Hartman's account at a local auto parts store listed a 4-gallon jug of antifreeze purchased hours before the poisoning.
They have me on camera, standing right there. Margaret was supposed to be invisible. Now we're both finished.
My car, my face, my hands pouring the jug. There's no defense. Cynthia will make me the villain.
Margaret sat on the curb of her burnt house, phone in hand, the surveillance screenshot staring back at her like an execution order.
If I get to the fire chief first, I can tell them Cynthia planned it all. I was just following orders. Maybe they'll give me a deal.
The district attorney's office confirmed an arrest warrant was being finalized for both women. Margaret picked up her car keys. The drive to CAL FIRE headquarters would be the longest of her life. Margaret didn't go to CAL FIRE. She drove straight to Cynthia's rental, anger outweighing fear.
Your goats, your bright idea. And now my house is ash. You never even touched the jug.
You poured it willingly. I only suggested a solution. You were the one who agreed.
Because you said no one would ever know. Now there's a video of me pouring it.
Cynthia's face went white. The surveillance tape was the loose end that was supposed to stay buried.
She's seen the tape. If she talks to Mitchell, I am finished.
I am going to CAL FIRE right now. You planned everything, and I'll tell them that.
If you do that, we both go down. They'll charge you just as much. Think about it.
I already have. I'd rather lose my freedom than keep living with your poison.
She's really doing it. She's going to the fire chief. It's over.
Margaret Vaughn walked through the glass doors of Cal Fire headquarters with the weight of every dead goat on her shoulders.
Chief Mitchell, I need to tell you about the goats. Everything. It was Cynthia's plan, but I poured the jug.
Start from the beginning, Mrs. Vaughn. Details matter. We'll record every word.
For an hour, she laid out every conversation, every text message, and the moment she tipped the poison into the trough.
She handed me the jug and said, "Pour it all. I have the receipt. It's on her credit card. I'll testify."
The sworn statement was typed, signed, and notarized. It included a full confession and an agreement to testify against Cynthia Hartman.
This is enough for an arrest warrant. We'll pick up Hartman tonight. You did the right thing.
Scott Edwards received the call at dusk. The chief's voice was even, but the words hit like a long-delayed thunderclap.
They're finally holding her accountable, but it won't bring back my goats.
The warrant was sealed, but the clock was now ticking. Cynthia Hartman had fewer hours of freedom than grains of ash on her former lawn. Dawn came with a knock. 2 deputies stood on Cynthia Hartman's doorstep with a warrant. She answered in a robe, face crumpling into the inevitable.
Cynthia Hartman, you are under arrest for felony animal cruelty and criminal negligence.
A neighbor's cell phone captured the perp walk. Her platinum bob was in disarray. Her magenta vest was in an evidence locker. By noon, her insurance company sent a certified letter. Coverage denied. Criminal acts aren't covered.
They're stripping everything. My house, my money, my future. All over goats.
The DA announced animal cruelty charges and warned that arson by negligence was under active review. Cynthia posted bail, frozen savings and all. She walked through a gauntlet of cameras without a word. Alone that night, she laid the denial letter and the arrest warrant on the kitchen table. The silence was louder than a goat's bleat.
Margaret sold me out. Now I am alone with a trial and a ruined life.
But even this was not the bottom. The DA had one more charge to file, and the press conference that would shatter her last relationship was now being scheduled. The district attorney filed 47 counts of arson by negligence. Each charge represented a home the goats would have saved. The decision by Cynthia Hartman to poison a contracted Cal Fire herd directly created the conditions that allowed the Oakwood fire to spread without containment.
47 counts. They're going to put me away for life over animals.
230 goats, and now 47 homes. The math is damning.
Her attorney's advice was blunt. There was no defense. The evidence was insurmountable. Outside the courthouse, protesters lined the streets with signs reading "Justice for the Goats" and "Your bleats burned our homes." National media descended on the small county. The story had everything: cruelty, karma, and a friendship on the brink.
I am the most hated woman in America, and Margaret escaped in a plea deal.
But the DA had one more stage to set. A press conference that would lay bare the entire chain of betrayal. And when that press conference came, the last thread of Cynthia's life would snap. The friend who poured the poison would hold the microphone. The press conference began with the timeline displayed on a screen: the goat's poisoning, the 2-week overgrowth, the spark, the 47 homes.
This contract proves the goats were the only fuel reduction strategy on that slope. Their death made the fire unstoppable.
An aerial map showed the grazing schedule perfectly overlapping the fire's path. The room went silent.
They were more than livestock. They were my partners. If they'd lived, those homes would still be standing.
Scott's words carried the weight of both loss and quiet vindication. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in on the contract.
Cynthia Hartman knowingly destroyed a fire prevention unit. The law will hold her accountable.
The message was clear. One woman's vendetta had cost 47 families their homes. Outside the conference room, the world was waiting for the final revelation. The friend who had poured the poison was about to speak, and when she did, the last cord holding Cynthia's life together would finally snap. Margaret Vaughn stepped to the microphone, her face years older than it had been before the fire. A reporter asked the question the world was waiting for. Were you also involved in the poisoning?
Cynthia made me do it. She ruined my life.
You were the one who poured it. You are the criminal, not me.
The screaming match drowned out the reporters. 2 decades of friendship collapsed into raw hatred under the camera lights.
I lost my house because of you. Everything I had is gone.
You destroyed yourself when you picked up that jug. I only suggested it.
Cameras captured every word. Within minutes, the clip would be seen by millions. The friendship died in that room, louder than any goat's bleat and far more destructive. The national news segment that followed would carry the headline, "Your Goat's Bleat, a karmic echo that would now define both women forever." The clip of the screaming match aired on every morning show, and the hashtag number, "Your Goat's Bleat," trended worldwide. Online, Cynthia Hartman became a meme, her face captured in rage, captioned with the words that had sealed her fate.
They're making jokes while my life collapses. Margaret got a plea deal, and I am the monster.
2 days later, she stood before a judge for a preliminary hearing, the courtroom packed with survivors of the fire. The DA announced no plea bargain would be offered. The state intended to seek the maximum penalty for each of the 47 counts.
No deal. They really are going to try to put me in prison for the rest of my life.
The trial date was set for 6 weeks out, fast-tracked due to public demand and the mountain of evidence.
Everyone hates me. The jury will convict me in an hour.
Outside the courthouse, the protesters were louder than ever, but inside, the only sound was the click of a court reporter's keys. The full weight of her cruelty was now locked into a legal calendar. Justice was a matter of time. Scott Edwards took the stand, his voice steady but carrying the grief of 230 lives.
I named every single one. They weren't just livestock, they were my partners, and they died in agony.
The prosecutor held up the Cal Fire contract, marking the grazing dates that would have stopped the fire in its tracks. Margaret Vaughn testified next, her voice cracking as she detailed how Cynthia planned the poisoning.
She said no one would ever know. She made me feel like it was for the community.
Cynthia sat rigid at the defense table, her attorney unable to counter the mountain of evidence. The jury retired for only 3 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was silent. The foreman read the verdict. Guilty on all 47 counts of arson by negligence, plus animal cruelty and environmental damage.
47. I heard it 47 times. Each one a home I helped burn.
Cynthia Hartman was now a convicted felon. The sentencing phase would determine the rest of her life. The judge's voice cut through the silent courtroom. Cynthia Hartman stood to hear her fate. "You are hereby sentenced to 47 years to life, plus restitution of $8.3 million. The first home destroyed that night belonged to the friend who poured the poison, a karmic ring of fire Cynthia never saw coming.
47 years. I'll die in prison, and Margaret's house was first. Because of me."
Scott Edwards sat motionless in the gallery, his calm anguish now tempered with something like peace. The HOA sign that had once symbolized her power now existed only in photographs submitted as evidence of her cruelty. As bailiffs placed her in cuffs, the final echo of the herd's bleating seemed to hang in the air. The hillside that should have been grazed remained a black scar, a monument to one woman's need to control silence. Cynthia Hartman was led from the courtroom, her magenta vest long gone, her platinum bob now streaked with gray. The verdict was final. The debt was paid in decades and ashes. Only the land remained to heal. Months after the verdict, the hillside was green again. Scott Edwards stood at the fence line, a new Cal Fire contract in his hand, a new herd behind him. At the old trough, 23 small crosses marked where his herd had fallen.
They're still with me.
The new goats spread across the slope, their Cal Fire tags glinting like tiny shields. A kid bleated, and Scott smiled for the first time in a year. The contract in his hand was proof that the land was once again a firebreak. The bleating Cynthia had silenced now filled the air, a wall of sound against the next blaze. Scott looked out over the hillside, the black scar barely a memory under the new green. He pressed his hand to his chest, not in anger, but in gratitude. The herd bleated back, and the hillside was no longer a graveyard.